let's shift focus for a moment and to look at the 2020 budget. Well, it's been said that it will help to readjust the budget cycle of Nigeria. But today, the House of Representatives Committee on Appropriation laid the 2020 budget before the House after the conclusion of the budget defense process. The report of the committee shows an increase from 10.3 trillion naira submitted by President Muhammadu Buhari to 10.6 trillion naira. The chairman of the Committee on Appropriations present and laid the 2020 budget report before the House. The committee report shows an increase of about 260 billion naira from the initial 10.3 trillion naira. What does this mean for Nigeria? The budget is expected to be passed before the end of the year so that we can start the January to December cycle. Let's begin our conversation and speak to a co-founder of Budget. Those are experts in the areas of budget and also issues of fiscal and economy issues. Mr. Onigbinde joins us from Kenya. Thank you so much, Mr. Onigbinde, for joining us tonight. What is the implication of what has happened today? Is it normal for us to see the increase and the jacking up of the figures on the budget as we saw today? What are your fears and what are your thoughts?
Thank you very much, thank you so much. Firstly, we start with the National Assembly. Firstly, we have to commend the National Assembly for trying to change the budget calendar. We have been struggling with aligning the budget calendar within the normal calendar year, within January to December. So being able to bring the committee report to the floor of the House, and the Senate and the House of Rep is something worth commending. I think we have to put out the note first. The second thing is to look at, this is a normal practice. I mean, as budgets, we believe that the power of appropriation for the budget, to any extent, belongs to the National Assembly. So National Assembly being the assembly of the people, full representatives of the people, they have the right to adjust, tamper, and even add projects to the budget. But what we always advise is that this should be done in agreement with the executive, considering that the executive cannot prosecute an executive for not delivering the budget. So what we have seen is it's normal to add 260 billion is by the House of Rep based on what we are following up. 450 billion is by the Senate based on what we are following up. And so there will be an harmonization. Firstly, the budget has to be passed by each respective houses. So the Senate has to pass the budget. The House of Rep will have to pass. And at the point, there will be an harmonization before the joint houses, the joint session passes the budget. Now we can now move forward with that. And that will now be transmitted to the president. If we are at this stage on December 4, shows that there's a huge possibility that the budget will be passed before the end of the year. And the increases are not
if there
great.
Isn't any issue of, what was it called at the time? Budget padding, yeah. If there is no issues of budget padding, because again, when the National Assembly passes on to the president for his assent, he has the right also to return it or not also pass it. So good news from you, according to you, that we are looking to readjustment. But again, the realization of some of the realities when the president presented the budget and now.
I mean, if you look at it very, very well, what we have done is right. I think the issue of padding, where we had in the past, there was some faults on the side of the executive, there were faults on the side of the legislature. So these faults were on both sides. And I think it was very, very clear that there had to be some harmonious relationship. What makes democracy work is not about what's written in the rule book. It's about arms of government respecting each other's spaces and having mutual understanding to work together. And I think even though you might look at it that if it's excessive, the legislator becomes rubber stamp. But the budget as a statement of a party or as a statement of a government should have some harmonious relationship. And I think on this point, we might have seen that most of the items that might be added to the budget are some executive concurrence. So I don't think padding should be an issue at this point. The budget itself needs a root to stem and root to branch reform. I mean, because what we have seen so far, there's still a lot of changes to be made to the budget. I mean, so many misallocation. You can see a situation where constituency projects are found in the budget of Ministry of Foreign Affairs or even the SGF office. So there's so many things. But I think at this point, everybody, the first target is to get the budget to follow the calendar year. I think the next year will now be the opportunity to be looking into the budget clearly and say where are the more spaces of need for reform. I think by what we have budgeted itself, it's too much. I mean, we've budgeted 10 trillion naira. I mean, our revenue in the last 2 years was over around 4 trillion naira. So if we're even going to do great in 2020, might do 5 trillion naira. Even with the whole public finance being reformed, I've looked into that bill. There's nothing drastic or something.
Because we have another issue to discuss, also we wanted to stay with us. But in 30 seconds, if you can tell me, if you say we should reduce to 5 trillion, the cap for the budget, and we're servicing debts for 2 trillion, isn't that a problem?
It's a problem because, our debt servicing is now around 2.7 trillion, keeps rising by almost 400 billion every month, every year. Salaries are going to be over 3 trillion with a new minimum wage increase. I don't know how this budget will be funded. I'm waiting to open up some miracle because I don't see, based on historical records and based on the capacity of the Nigerian government to collect, I don't know how this budget of 10 trillion naira will be funded on the back of 5 trillion naira revenue.
Well, that's a very big question, though. Stay with us, Mr. Onigbinde, because we're talking also about an issue that you are also interested in. Let's move quickly away from the budget and to the issues of pension for former governors. The court has ordered the federal government to recover pensions collected by former governors now serving as ministers and members of the National Assembly, and directed the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Mr. Abubakar Malami, to challenge the legality of state pension laws permitting former governors and other ex-public officials to collect such pensions. Former governors now serving as ministers and members of the National Assembly may have to cough out the money they have collected as pensions since leaving office as state chief executives. This is because of the Federal High Court, Lagos, which ordered the federal government to recover the funds and also direct the Attorney General to challenge the legality of the state pension laws. Don't forget what happened in Zamfara. One of the reasons that spurred this. Let's get to talk about this and the implications. I have joining me a political strategist and analyst and a lawyer, Mr. Curtis Adigba. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Mr. Onigbinde is still with us on this one. We look at the economic side of what has happened, and also let's look at the legal side of it, because what was taken to court in part is the fact that whether or not the federal government can come on to the states about the laws that are formulated by the State House of Assembly, but the court has said the federal government does have the power. What is the implication of this judgment?
Well, first of all, let me say that I'm not sitting on appeal on the judgment of the learned judge. As lawyers, we are trained to accept the judgment of court until they are set aside. However, for the purpose of the public, I think I'll be making some brief comments about what happened in the court, which is to the effect that a body had challenged the refusal of the Federal Attorney General to move against certain laws at some promulgated by State House of Assemblies, and he didn't want to do that because he felt that under the law he didn't have the power, or there was no duty imposed on him by any law to do so. And so Serap went to court for seeking for an order of mandamus to compel the Attorney General to do what he had refused. And the court said he should go ahead and do that. Now, there's a problem with that, because if you look at that,
you will tell us about the problem, Mr. Adigba, because if I've been collecting pensions for 4 years, how will I return those pensions? That's one of the implications, isn't it? Because we need to take a break. When we come back, we will allow Mr. Adigba, he's the expert here in law, to explain to us what this means in the point of view of the law. And Mr. Onigbinde is standing by to also tell us what this means for the pocket of the state government when an ex-governor in some states is getting about 700 million naira annually. Here you heard right. We'll talk about this when we return, everyone. Join us again. Perhaps one of the most lucrative things that the law permits in the country, if I were governor of XYZ state, in 2 years, after serving, in 2 years, I probably would have collected about 1.4 billion naira doing nothing. I just have served as a governor in that state. So there are some states where the law of the state permits the governor, after serving as a governor, to earn about 700 million naira in pension. So in 2 years, he may have earned about 1.4 billion Nigerian naira. So in Zamfara State, the sitting governor repealed that law to give governors, not only governors, deputy governors, and some other principal officer. So that's what we are discussing. So a court of appeal has said the federal government and Attorney General should go and make sure that they refund this money and challenge this case. That's what we are discussing at this moment. Mr. Curtis Adigba is a lawyer. We're having a conversation over this matter. And it does look like the conversation as where we're debating during the break, it looks like we're headed for a constitutional crisis.
I think so. Look, if you look at the Constitution, Section 174, it lists clearly the functions and the powers of the Federal Attorney General. And when you look at Section 211, and all the subsections, it gives you the power of the State Attorney General. Now, when the Federal Attorney General is ordered to go after former state officials, okay, based on laws that were validly made by the State House of Assembly as granted power by Section 100 of the same Constitution, 1999 Constitution, because under that section, they can make laws for their states. Now, the question is, the collection of the pension, which the court has ordered the Attorney General to go after, is it a criminal offense, going by the laws that were made by the State House of Assembly? And that's why I think that the smarter way to deal with this issue is what happened in Zamfara, where the governor got the leadership of the State House of Assembly together to say, the state cannot afford this. And so the law was abolished, okay? Now, if you are...
in Zamfara case, the repealing of that law does not indicate whether or not they should return the monies that they've collected.
Yeah, again, that's another issue. If you repeal a law, does it act retrospectively or it moves forward? The idea thing is that the law should go forward, about by stopping what has happened in the past.
Okay.
Because at the time the money was paid, there was a law backing it.
So whatever those governors or ex-governors have collected, it isn't illegal because the law in the state permits it.
Yes,
but the question
there
is
was a law.
Mr. Malamin now, he does not have the power based on the Constitution that you have quoted, the portion of the Constitution. Yeah. But the judgment of the Court of Appeal now, has it not empowered him to act in that sense?
No, what the judge of the Federal High Court said is that he should put in place a mechanism to ensure that these funds are returned. And how is he going to do it? He probably will speak to the Attorney General of the state concerned or the state's concerned to say, look, you guys have got to initiate certain proceedings to recover these funds. But here's, look, that's not even my problem. I think the reason why Nigerians are opposed to this payment is because of the immorality of the sums that are involved.
Getting about 700 million, now, almost 700 million from one person.
We know how
when salaries are not paid in some of these states.
We know how powerful these governors are. We knew, look, the kind of resources they made while they were state governors, either from the security votes, which is not accounted for, and all that. And then for serving for 8 years, you are paying yourself billions in a few years. You are getting your vehicles. There's nothing wrong with making provisions for pensions for them.
Probably get choice houses now, in Abuja.
Former presidents also have provisions for themselves. I hope you know that. And it's in the Constitution. In fact, we've been told that over 12 billion has been spent on the emolument and salaries of former presidents in the country. But the problem with these laws at the state level is that the amounts involved are just way too much for someone who has served for 8 years. And we have people who have served for 35 years and cannot be guaranteed their pension on a monthly basis. And they are drawing their own pensions. They're getting vehicles bought for them every 3 years. They're traveling abroad with their family members for medicals paid for, holidays paid for. This is what I propose. I am not saying they shouldn't be given any level of pension at all. But their pension should be limited to that which a retired permanent secretary in the civil service will earn.
That should solve the problem.
That should solve the problem.
Because a lot of people they have drawn immorality into it.
Yeah.
That, look, the state is not having money, but yet you can pay.
No, even if the state do have money, it is not justified that because you served the state for a period of 8 years, you should then be living that kind of lifestyle at the expense of the state when majority of the people, those who hired you to serve them for 8 years, cannot even afford 1% of the lifestyle.
All right. Mr. Onigbinde, let me get your view on this matter. It's going to be a brief one. What are your thoughts?
Firstly, let's start with the Attorney General. We can copy the U.S. Constitution, but we not copy it properly. The Attorney General in Nigeria needs to respond solely to the public. What we have created in Nigeria is an Attorney General just like another Minister of Justice. And I think that's what the judge is trying to point out here. The obligation of the Attorney General should come to the public. And that's why you look at the constitutional democracies, they try to protect the office of the Attorney General from political influence. And I hope and I wish the Attorney General would stand up in the interest of the public on this issue, because it's obscene. It's waste, extreme waste, to see governors living with obscene amount of funds. And you know that the weakest element of institution in Nigeria is the State House of Assembly. The governor chooses who becomes the leader and removes the leader at his whim and caprice. And I think there has to be a way to challenge this. But I think what the court said, based on what I've read, is not that all the state governors should refund the funds. The court is saying, and this is what Serap is saying, you cannot be an ex-governor and sit in the National Assembly and still be paid twice. So you are getting income, being a minister or being a member of the National Assembly. You're also being paid as an ex-governor of your state.
Let's close. I understand some of these guys have refused when these issues came up. But let's close now. We have 20 seconds. Your final words.
Shenwu, you can't be a retiree, earning pension, and still be earning salary somewhere if you are engaged to do another job. That's not the point. The point is that the amount of money involved here, you understand? We know that, like he said, the governors, the former governors, sat down with the leadership of the State House Assembly that cannot say no to them and pass these laws.
For their own benefits.
For their own benefits. And so it looks like just because we've had the privilege of serving in the state before, the state now belongs to us. And that's what people are complaining about. It's not like saying they are not entitled to anything at all. But it's got to be reasonable. And that's why I'm saying, let's make it the pension of a retired permanent secretary. You know, which is, of course, like the highest position you can attain.
In federal service, in civil service.
Yeah.
Mr. Curtis Adigba, always a pleasure having you break down all of these issues. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. Mr. Curtis Adigba, a political strategist and a lawyer. Mr. Onigbinde, the CEO of Budget, thank you so much for coming on tonight. But that's our show for tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Sean Okimale. Bye for now.